The cabin lights glowed amber as Flight 907 prepared for takeoff from Heathrow to Dubai. A hush spread through the first-class cabin. Diamonds glittered, perfume drifted, and the quiet arrogance of old money filled the air. Seat 13 degrees Fahrenheit looked out of place, not because of its location, but because of the girl sitting there, Lyra Al-Naim, barely 20, in a worn denim jacket and weathered satchel, didn't belong among the silk scarves and Cartier watches. The crew barely glanced at her. To them, she was just another economy upgrade, a lucky traveler who had somehow slipped through the velvet curtain. But what no one knew was that her passport, tucked deep in that satchel, bore the gold insignia of House Al-Naim, one of the Gulf's oldest dynasties. And the man sitting 2 rows ahead, in seat 11A, was her estranged father, Sheikh Lyra Al-Naim, the Arab billionaire who owned half the airlines in the Middle East. They hadn't spoken in 5 years. Lyra didn't even want this flight. But the letter had come 2 days ago, summoning her to Dubai for a family matter. No explanation, no apology, just an order signed with his seal. As the engines roared to life, she pressed her forehead against the window, watching the night swallow the runway lights. Across the aisle, a man's voice interrupted her thoughts. "Excuse me, miss. You're sitting in the wrong section." It was Captain Ellis, off-duty and arrogant in his pilot's uniform, traveling as a passenger. He eyed her like she'd wandered into a forbidden room. Lyra turned her gaze toward him, calm but cold. "My ticket says 13 degrees Fahrenheit." He smirked. "First class isn't for—" He hesitated, scanning her clothes. Students. Before she could respond, a stewardess arrived. Nadia, tall, elegant, with the accent of someone trained to please. "Everything all right here, Captain?" Ellis smiled. "Just making sure the seating chart isn't compromised." The words hung in the air, soft enough to sound polite, sharp enough to humiliate. Lyra didn't react, not yet, but her eyes shifted toward her father's reflection in the glass ahead. Sheikh Idran had heard every word and did nothing. The seatbelt light flickered. The aircraft began its climb, and though no one noticed, the girl in 13 degrees Fahrenheit slowly unclipped the small silver locket from around her neck, revealing what lay inside: a miniature insignia of the Royal Aerial Corps and a call sign engraved in Arabic, Falcon 13. The flight leveled out over the channel. Seatbelt lights dimmed, and the air hummed with quiet conversation and champagne laughter. But Lyra stayed still, staring at her reflection in the dark window. In 11A, Sheikh Idran Al-Naim scrolled through his phone, surrounded by quiet deference. Every steward, every attendant, even the co-pilot off-duty, seemed to orbit around him. Yet he never once looked back toward 13 Fef. It had been years since Lyra last saw him. The last time was in Abu Dhabi, the night her mother had died. Idran had sent guards to take her away, claiming she disgraced the family by refusing an arranged marriage. She was only 15 then, and now, at 20, she was back on his plane, flying toward a city she swore she'd never see again. The seat beside her creaked. The same arrogant Captain Ellis leaned over with a grin. "Look, sweetheart," he said, tapping her armrest. "This is first class, not a bus stop. I could have security move you if you prefer the back of the plane." Lyra's jaw tightened. "I prefer silence." He laughed, a rich man's laugh, loud enough for the others to notice. "She's got fire." "I like that," he said to a pair of businessmen nearby. They chuckled. From ahead, Idran's assistant, Karim Dosari, turned, frowning at the commotion. He recognized Lyra instantly. His face went pale. But Sheikh Idran's expression didn't change. He had seen and chosen to ignore. Karim whispered something to Idran. The sheikh replied coldly, without looking back. She came uninvited. Let her learn. The humiliation burned. Lyra's fingers brushed the insignia hidden in her locket. Falcon 13, her heart hammered with memories she'd buried. The desert training fields, the smell of gun oil, the sound of a commander saying, "Remember your call sign, not your name. A falcon doesn't beg to fly." Outside, lightning flashed in the distance. The captain's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're expecting turbulence ahead. Please fasten your seatbelts." Lyra looked up. Her eyes had changed, calm, cold, alert, because deep down the falcon inside her had already felt something wrong. The engines hummed, but one tone was off, a faint metallic vibration beneath the left wing, one that only a trained ear would recognize. The girl in 13 degrees Fahrenheit straightened in her seat. Something was about to happen, and no one, not her father, not the arrogant captain, had any idea who they were sitting beside. The cabin lights dimmed to a sleepy amber glow. Passengers reclined, murmuring, sipping wine. But Lyra's senses, razor-sharp, disciplined, were tuned to every vibration. The hum of the engines, the frequency of the propeller resonance, even the subtle tone in the hydraulics. It wasn't right. Years of field experience, buried beneath a civilian facade, whispered to her, something's failing. The seatbelt sign blinked. Then the plane jolted. Hard. Gasps erupted. Glass clinked. A toddler cried somewhere near row 9. Captain Ellis's voice came over the speaker. Calm, too calm, just a little pocket of air, folks. Nothing to worry about. Lyra gritted her teeth. That tone, she'd heard it before. The tone of a man lying through his teeth. She pressed the attendant call button. No one came. Instead, 2 flight attendants whispered nervously near the galley, one clutching her headset. She caught fragments of their words. Pressure drop. Left engine temperature spiking. Control relay not responding. Lyra's pulse quickened. She stood. "Ma'am, please take your seat," said one attendant, forcing a nervous smile. "Sit down," snapped Captain Ellis from the cockpit door, his face flushed as he leaned out briefly. "We're handling it." Lyra's eyes locked on his. "No, you're not." The words hung there, confident, cutting through the panic. Several passengers turned. Ellis sneered. "And who exactly are you to make that call?" Lyra held his stare, her voice low but steady. "Someone who knows when a hydraulic relay fails before it's too late." He froze. "What?" She stepped closer. "I said your pressure stabilizer is overheating. I heard it 15 seconds before your cockpit alarm did. You've got 30 seconds before the left side control flap seizes completely." The attendants glanced between them. Ellis's jaw twitched. He slammed the door shut. Lyra exhaled slowly, then turned to find a dozen curious eyes watching her, including Karim Dosari, the Sheikh's assistant. He whispered something urgently into his phone, then to Sheikh Idran. "She noticed before the pilot did, sir. Before you did." Idran didn't respond immediately. His eyes, dark, unreadable, were fixed on Lyra. That same calm, unflinching look she'd had as a child when facing his wrath. The plane shuddered again. The cabin lights flickered. Someone screamed, and amid the chaos, one sound broke through the noise, a warning alarm from the cockpit, continuous, piercing. Lyra knew it before anyone else did. They were losing altitude, fast, and for the first time, even Sheikh Idran looked afraid. The cabin was a storm of gasps and panic now. Overhead compartments rattled, drinks spilled across trembling hands. A voice shouted, "We're descending too fast." The pitch of the engines dropped to a grave hum. Lyra's hand gripped the armrest, steadying herself against the violent shuddering. She'd felt turbulence before. This wasn't it. This was failure. Controlled flight failure. From the cockpit, muffled yelling, the sound of confusion, of men losing control. Then, the announcement, "This is your captain. We're experiencing temporary mechanical difficulty. Please remain calm." The speaker cut to static. Lyra looked to the front of the plane. She could see Ellis's silhouette pacing behind the locked door. The co-pilot's shadow moved erratically. She stood again. This time, Karim Dosari blocked her path. "Please, miss," he said, his voice polite but firm. "Sit down. The captain has everything under control." Lyra's tone sliced through him like cold steel. If he did, the altimeter wouldn't be screaming at him right now. Karim's confidence faltered. How do you know that sound?" "Because I've heard it, in darker skies," she replied. She brushed past him, walked to the cockpit door, and knocked. Once, then twice, hard enough to echo through the fuselage. No answer. Passengers whispered, some filming on their phones, others praying under their breath. Then came the Sheikh's voice, low, commanding. "Let her through." Karim's eyes widened. "Sir, that's—" "I said, Let her through. Lyra turned back. The old man was standing now, his robe immaculate despite the chaos, his gold cufflinks glinting faintly in the cabin lights. "Who are you, girl?" he demanded. She stared him down, her expression cold but oddly familiar. "I'm the one who's going to save your plane, Sheikh Idran." A hush fell across the cabin. The Sheikh studied her face, a flicker of something old, long buried, flicked in his eyes. Recognition, fear, and maybe guilt. He nodded slowly. "Do it." Karim reluctantly keyed the cockpit lock override. The door hissed open. Captain Ellis spun around, furious. "What the hell? You can't be here!" Lyra stepped inside. The smell of burning insulation hit her nose instantly. Her eyes scanned the control panel. She didn't need time to orient. Instinct guided her. "Your hydraulic line's cooked. You're losing pressure from both left actuators," she said sharply. "You've got one working auxiliary system, but you're rerouting it wrong." Ellis blinked, sweat on his brow. "Who the hell are you? Some kind of engineer?" Her gaze hardened. "Something like that." She reached for the emergency stabilizer toggle. He tried to stop her. "Don't touch that." But she already had. The plane jolted violently once, then steadied. The alarm silenced. Gasps erupted from the cabin beyond. Ellis turned to her in disbelief. What did you just do?" Lyra met his eyes, stopped us from being another headline. And outside the windshield, the horizon returned. But what no one yet knew was that this flight had only just begun to fall apart. The cabin roared with relieved applause, but Lyra didn't even flinch. Her pulse was steady, eyes locked on the flickering lights across the control board. Captain Ellis collapsed into his seat, muttering, "That's impossible. How did she—" Lyra turned to him, voice low. "You've got 20 minutes before the system reroutes failsafe. If you don't land by then, gravity will finish what your arrogance started." She walked out of the cockpit without waiting for an answer, and the moment she did, the cabin fell silent. Every eye turned to her, every whisper stopped. She passed Sheikh Idran, his gaze now a razor's edge between disbelief and awe. "Who are you?" he demanded again, but quieter this time. Lyra paused. A faint smile, not of warmth but of memory, curved her lips. "Ask your conscience, Sheikh." Then she walked down the aisle, back to seat 13. The attendant stared as she sat down again, buckled her belt, and closed her eyes as if nothing had happened. But Idran couldn't sit still. He leaned toward Karim, his trusted aide. "Find out who she is, now." Karim nodded, pulled out his tablet, and connected to the onboard Wi-Fi. He typed her name from the manifest, Lyra Hale. Within seconds his face turned pale. "Sir," he whispered, showing the Sheikh the screen, a government file, redacted, classified, but the name glowed at the top. Lyra Al-Naim. Idran froze. The surname hit like a thunderclap in his chest. Al-Naim. His own bloodline. The name he had once buried to erase the memory of a forbidden marriage, long ago. "She can't be," he muttered. "That child died." Karim swallowed hard. "Apparently not, sir." The Sheikh's hand trembled slightly, the first sign of emotion he'd shown in years. Meanwhile, Lyra stared out the window, her reflection ghosting against the cloud line. Her mind wasn't on the applause or the crisis. It was on the man 10 rows ahead, the father who had cast her mother out into exile for not being pure enough for his dynasty, the father who now owed her his life, a cruel poetic symmetry that even she hadn't planned for. Outside, thunder rolled like a drumbeat over the ocean, and deep in Lyra's chest, the rage she had buried for 20 years stirred like a sleeping storm, ready to break. The storm outside was gathering momentum. Sheets of rain lashed across the plane's wings. Thunder rumbled through the hull. The seatbelt signs blinked again, and a nervous hush fell over the passengers. Lyra's fingers drummed quietly against the armrest. She wasn't afraid of turbulence. She'd flown through war zones with half the fuselage missing. What unsettled her was the silence from the front row. She knew Sheikh Idran wouldn't stay quiet for long. A few minutes later, Karim approached, his eyes uneasy. "Miss Hale, the Sheikh requests your presence." Lyra didn't move at first. Her eyes stayed fixed on the rain-smeared window. "Request or command?" Kareem hesitated. He doesn't command you anymore, does he? Her lips twitched into something that wasn't quite a smile. Smart man. She unbuckled her seatbelt and rose, every step down the aisle drawing curious stares. When she stopped before the Sheikh, he motioned for Kareem to step aside. For the first time in decades, they stood face to face. Idran looked older than she remembered, but his presence still filled the cabin, a man used to bending the world to his will. "You've grown," he said softly, "and you look like her." Lyra tilted her head. "That's what you said the night you left her." A few passengers glanced at each other, sensing tension thicker than the storm outside. Idran's composure wavered. "I thought you, both of you, died in that accident." "You made it an accident," she cut in sharply. "You erased us from your record to protect your empire. My mother wasn't the right kind of woman for the Al-Naim name." The words hit like bullets, low, precise, unflinching. Kareem swallowed, trying to disappear into the background. The Sheikh's knuckles tightened around his cane. "You have no idea what it meant to carry this name in those days. The board, the family, they would have destroyed her." "They destroyed her anyway," Lyra snapped, "while you stood by." A sudden crack of lightning illuminated the cabin, followed by a deafening boom. The plane lurched violently. Screams erupted. Luggage tumbled from overhead compartments. Lyra gripped the headrest, eyes darting to the cockpit. The red warning lights were flashing again. She turned to Idran. "You want to save your name? Help me save your passengers." Before he could reply, the intercom buzzed. Captain Ellis's trembling voice. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've lost one engine. Please remain calm." Static cut him off. Lyra met her father's eyes, the same shade of storm gray as her own. "Sit down, Sheikh," she said coldly. "This time I'm the one flying your destiny." Without waiting, she sprinted back toward the cockpit. The storm howled outside, but inside, it was bloodlines that were about to break. Lyra burst into the cockpit, rain pounding so hard against the windshield it sounded like machine gun fire. Warning lights painted the control panels crimson. Fuel imbalance, engine 1 shutdown, hydraulic assist failure. Captain Ellis was pale, trembling as he fumbled with the controls. "We've lost thrust. We're dead stick gliding at 30,000 feet. Lyra shoved past him, voice like command steel. "Then stop panicking and let me fly." Ellis blinked. "You can't." "I can, and I will," she barked. "Get in the jump seat or get out of my way." Her tone carried something that made even trained soldiers move. Authority forged in chaos. Ellis slid aside wordlessly. Lyra's hands gripped the yoke, her posture suddenly transforming. No longer a passenger, but the predator of the sky she once was. She flicked switches in rapid sequence. Cut crossfeed to engine 1. Stabilize through manual trim. Override the bleed valve. The plane groaned as it responded. A massive mechanical beast obeying its true master again. Behind her, through the open cockpit door, passengers could see her silhouette framed by lightning. A lone woman wrestling metal and wind. In row 1, Sheikh Idran stared silently. The realization dawned on him like slow dawn over the desert. She wasn't improvising. She knew these machines intimately. Kareem whispered, "Sir, she flies like a combat pilot." Idran's breath caught. He remembered a classified military rumor years ago, the Ghost Falcon, a female sniper turned flight tactician, who flew Black Ops missions over the Syrian coast. No one knew her name, until now. Back in the cockpit, Lyra's voice cut through the alarms. "Come on, sweetheart," she muttered to the plane. "Hold together just a little longer." The co-pilot looked at her astonished. "You've flown a military-grade craft before, haven't you?" She didn't look up. "More than one." "Less forgiving than this one." Outside, lightning clawed at the wings. The plane banked hard, diving briefly before she pulled it back under control. The passengers screamed again, and yet, as they saw her stabilize the aircraft, silence followed. Reverence even. Lyra's headset crackled. "Air traffic control breaking through. Flight 707, we've lost your transponder. Identify yourself." She pressed the button calmly. "This is Lyra Hale." "Correction, Commander Lyra Hale. Former Ghost Falcon Squadron. Preparing emergency descent vector." The controller stuttered. "Commander?" "Copy that, Commander Hale. We're clearing all airspace ahead of you." And then, chaos turned to command. Lyra had taken the skies. She leaned back slightly, exhaling. the glow of warning lights softening as systems stabilized. But deep inside, she knew this wasn't the final fight. She could fly through a storm, but the storm within, that was still circling her father in seat 1A. The thunderstorm outside was easing, but inside the cabin, the real turbulence had just begun. Passengers whispered prayers, clutched hands, some too terrified to even blink. Yet amid the flickering cabin lights, all eyes kept drifting toward one man, Sheikh Lyra Al-Naim. He hadn't moved since Lyra took command. His hands rested on his cane, the golden head trembling slightly with each vibration. Karim leaned closer. "Sir, we're going to make it. She's stabilizing the descent." Idran didn't answer. His gaze stayed locked on the open cockpit door, where his daughter, the ghost he'd buried decades ago, was fighting to keep 200 souls alive. Then, as if sensing his stare, Lyra turned her head slightly. Their eyes met through the narrow opening, and for a single heartbeat time froze. She saw regret. He saw strength that should have been nurtured, not denied. He rose slowly, ignoring the protests of his aide. The passengers parted for him instinctively, as if sensing the weight of something larger than fear. He walked to the cockpit threshold, bracing himself against the doorframe. "Lyra," he said quietly, the first time he'd ever spoken her name aloud. She didn't look away from the console. "Now you remember it." The edge in her voice was sharp, but there was pain buried beneath. "I thought I was protecting you," he began, voice trembling against the hum of the engines. "Your mother, she was strong, brilliant, but she was marked by those who saw her blood as unworthy. I sent her away to save her." Lyra's knuckles whitened on the throttle. "You call abandonment salvation? She was hunted," he said softly. "And you were born into a war I couldn't control. I faked your deaths so they'd stop looking for you." Lyra's eyes flicked to him, fury and disbelief colliding in one gaze. "And then what, father? You just lived your empire while we vanished?" He swallowed hard. "I searched, for years, until I believed I'd lost both of you for good." Her voice cracked, barely audible over the roar outside. "You did?" Silence fell between them, the kind that stretches wider than oceans. Then the control panel chimed again. Altitude warning. Lyra forced her focus back. "Conversation's over," she said sharply. "We're landing." Idran hesitated. "Let me help." She turned, incredulous. "Help? You can't even face what you created." And yet, something in his eyes stopped her. Not arrogance, but an old soldier's steadiness she'd never known he had. He stepped into the cockpit, lowering himself into the co-pilot's seat. "I may not fly anymore," he said quietly, "but I remember the protocol for manual descent. You handle the controls. I'll handle the pressure feed." For a moment she stared, torn between disbelief and the instinct to command. Then finally she nodded once. "Fine. Don't mess it up." The Sheikh managed a faint, broken smile. "I wouldn't dare. Not again." Together, father and daughter, divided by pride, reunited by survival, took the aircraft down through the final wall of clouds. And somewhere in that descent, forgiveness began to take shape. The runway lights appeared like a constellation through the thinning clouds, a glowing promise of survival. Lyra's hands gripped the yoke, steady as stone. Beside her, Sheikh Idran adjusted the pressure feed levers, his movements slow but sure. The air traffic controller's voice crackled in her headset, tense but respectful. "Commander Hale, you're cleared for emergency landing. Fire and rescue are on standby." Lyra inhaled deeply. "Copy that, tower. Brace for hard contact." The plane shook violently as the first gust hit. She countered instinctively, banking the craft to fight the crosswind. "Flaps at 15, she ordered. "Flaps set," Idran confirmed, voice calm now, the tone of a man rediscovering discipline. For a fleeting moment, they moved in rhythm, two halves of a severed legacy working as one. The landing gear deployed with a metallic groan. Sparks lit up the sky as friction bit steel. The passengers screamed, clutching armrests, prayers mingling with shouts of hope. Lyra's voice cut through the chaos, unwavering. "Stay calm. I've got you." The plane's wheels hit tarmac. Once, then again, bouncing under the brutal weight before locking onto the ground. Smoke plumed from the tires. The sound was thunderous. But then, silence. A deep, endless silence that felt like rebirth. The aircraft slowed, shuddered, and came to a stop. For a long moment, no one moved. Then slowly, applause broke out, uncertain at first, then roaring through the cabin like a wave. Lyra released the yoke, her shoulders trembling for the first time. She let out a shaky breath, staring straight ahead. "It's over," she whispered. Idrin looked at her, really looked, and the pride in his eyes wasn't gilded by status or legacy. It was raw. Human. "No," he said softly. "It's beginning." Emergency crews surrounded the plane. Medics rushed aboard, cameras flashed from the terminal windows, and soon the world would know. As Lyra stepped out onto the rain-slick tarmac, drenched in flashing red and blue lights, an air marshal approached. "Commander Hale?" She turned. "Ma'am, the Pentagon's been trying to reach you for 20 minutes. They want to confirm your identity, and to thank you." The crowd of reporters behind the barricades murmured in awe as the realization spread. The mysterious passenger from 13 degrees Fahrenheit wasn't just a soldier. She was the Ghost Falcon, the legend thought dead, the woman who had just saved 200 lives midair. And behind her, Sheikh walked slowly, his head bowed. For the first time in his life, the billionaire known for commanding armies and building empires wasn't the man being saluted. This time, he was the one offering it, to his daughter. He raised his hand, the crisp, solemn gesture of a man acknowledging not power, but redemption, and Lyra, eyes glistening, returned it, wordlessly. The crowd fell silent. The cameras caught it, a salute between blood and forgiveness. The morning after the landing, headlines blazed across every major network: Ghost Falcon lives. Billionaire Sheikh's estranged daughter saves 217 lives midair. Images of Lyra standing before the grounded jet spread like wildfire. Her flight suit half-zipped, hair streaked with rain, eyes burning with quiet resolve. She looked less like a survivor, more like a myth reborn. At a private airfield outside London, cameras gathered again. The Sheikh's personal jet gleamed behind her, but this time the spotlight wasn't his. Lyra stepped up to the podium, her voice steady. "I didn't save those passengers because of my name," she said. "I saved them because someone had to, and maybe because for the first time I stopped running from who I am." The crowd was silent, hanging on every word. She turned slightly toward her father, seated just behind her. "Some people believe blood defines you, that your worth comes from the family you're born into, but I've learned it's the choices you make, the courage to face the sky when everyone else hides from the storm, that defines who you are." She paused, her gaze softening. "Even if that storm is your own past." The Sheikh stood, walking to her side. Cameras flashed wildly as he faced the reporters. "My daughter," he said quietly, "is the only name that matters today." He placed a hand over hers on the podium. "And for the first time in my life, I'm proud of the person I didn't create, but the one I lost who found herself." Applause swelled. The world saw a man stripped of pride and a woman crowned by destiny. Lyra looked up, the faintest smile breaking through the mask of command. The sky above was clear now, soft blue streaks gliding where storms had once raged. She whispered to herself, "The sky belongs to no one, but those brave enough to fly it, in a world obsessed with power, legacy, and control." Lyra Hale proved something timeless. True honor isn't inherited. It's earned in moments of courage when no one's watching. And sometimes, the greatest victories aren't in bringing a plane down safely, but in rising above the wreckage of your past, because forgiveness, like flight, always begins with letting go.